Hello students. So today through this video I'm going to discuss about the major parts of respiration. So respiration it is the process through which glucose molecule is mainly broken down by the oxygen which we mainly inhaled through the through our nose part from the atmosphere. And this respiration, it is the chemical process of releasing energy by breaking down glucose for carrying out life processes. Now if we observe the major parts of respiration, we can see there will be four major steps for the respiration. Now stepwise I will discuss about the parts. So first step, if we observe step 1, it is called as breathing. Okay, so breathing, it is a physical process. You can observe here. So breathing, it is a physical process, and through this process, actually, we are inhaling oxygen from the atmosphere, and we are exhaling out CO2 to the atmosphere from our body. So here, the oxygen which we mainly inhaled from the atmosphere, that oxygen, it finally moves to the mainly moves to the windpipe, and then it finally moves to the lung part through various portions. Okay, now breathing means here it is indicating the collective form of inhalation and exhalation. So you can observe here, when breathing occur, when we intake oxygen, that time the lungs part expanded, and the diaphragm is mainly helping in this inspiration process, because the lungs is mainly expanding here, so the diaphragm part is mainly pushed down. So this way it mainly adjusting the space for the lungs, which is now expanding due to the entry of the oxygen. And in the same time the rib cages, they are also helping. Okay, so the diaphragm and the rib cage, these are the two parts which are mainly helping in the respiration, mainly in the breathing process. So when we inhale the oxygen, that time lungs expand and the diaphragm part is pushed down. And in at opposite side, if you observe the exhalation process, that means when we breathe out CO2, that time lungs get smaller, and as the lungs get smaller here, so here the diagram pushes up. Okay, so this way the breathing process is mainly regulated due to the movement of the diaphragm and the rib cage. So this is the first step. So we inhaled oxygen from the atmosphere. That is the first step. Now if we observe the second step is known as gaseous transport. So here the gaseous transport is indicating the transportation of the oxygen and CO2. So first, if we observe the oxygen which we mainly inhale from the atmosphere, so that oxygen here, it finally enters, that oxygen, it finally enters, sorry, that oxygen, it finally enters through the nasal aperture, and it moves to the pharynx, then to the trachea, that is also called as windpipe, and then it mainly moving to the primary bronchus. And then from the primary bronchus, it moves to the secondary bronchi, then to the tertiary bronchi, and then finally to the air sacs, which is also called as alveolar sac. Okay, so this part is indicating here the alveolar sac, which we can see it is associated with the blood capillaries. So here, if we observe the air sac part, so this one is mainly indicating the structure of one air sac. This is one air sac or alveoli. Now the oxygen which mainly entered through the inhalation process, which mainly enter through the primary bronchus, secondary bronchus, tertiary bronchus, which finally enter inside the alveolus. So that oxygen which is now present inside the air sac, it mainly moving to the neighboring blood capillaries, and mainly now it is moving inside the RBCs, because RBCs are the main blood cells which are helping in the transportation of the oxygen. So inside the RBC, hemoglobin pigment, which is the red color pigment, it is present. And that hemoglobin, it mainly combines with the oxygen. And then it forms the HbO2, that is also called oxyhemoglobin. So oxygen inside the blood vessel or inside the RBC, it is not present as a free form, but it is as a combined form, which is now called as oxyhemoglobin. So that oxygen, it now moving through the RBCs. Now it is mainly carrying by the blood vessels, mainly carrying by the blood. Okay, and then it moving to the target parts. So that oxygen which we mainly inhaled, which finally entered inside the blood vessels from the air sacs, it finally transporting to the various body organs, to the various body parts. Okay, now in the next step, if you observe, that means the tissue which mainly in taking the oxygen which is coming through the blood vessels. So the terminal blood vessels, that means the blood capillaries which are associated with the tissues, they finally capture, they finally pick up that oxygen from the blood vessels. So blood vessels here which are mainly flowing, the blood which are mainly consists of the blood, and their blood cells are present. So here the RBCs, or the red blood cells here, so they are just diffusing in the oxygen. So the oxyhemoglobin which was initially, the oxyhemoglobin which was formed inside the blood cells, mainly inside the RBCs, now the hemoglobin part become detached, and due to the dissociation of hemoglobin, that oxygen now can easily enter inside the cells of the tissues. So this part is mainly actually representing here the parts of the tissue cells. Okay, they have just shown us three cells here. So, and the tissue fluid is also there, the space which is present in between the cells of the tissues, known as tissue fluid. So here inside the tissue, the cells are present, and that cells, they finally got the oxygen which is coming through the RBCs, and at the same time they are, okay, that part I will discuss later about the CO2 part. Now next you come to the step 4, that means the oxygen which finally enter inside the cell. Now that oxygen they are using for one chemical reaction, and that chemical reaction is the actual reaction of the respiration. That means where the oxygen molecule is finally degrading the glucose molecule, and that oxygen, through the degradation of the glucose, it finally release out carbon dioxide, water, and the chemical form of energy, ATP. So here we can see the carbon dioxide which we mainly formed as an end product of cellular respiration, that carbon dioxide, it comes to the cells of the tissues, and then it finally moves out to the blood vessels, to the neighboring blood vessels. Okay, but here when it entered inside the blood vessels and mainly inside the RBCs, that time the hemoglobin, it mainly picks that carbon dioxide and form HbCO2, or carboaminohemoglobin. So CO2 inside the blood vessel is not flowing as a form of free form, but as a form of combined form, that is called as carboaminohemoglobin. And then in the alveolar part, the RBCs finally diffuse out, or diffuse in that CO2 in the alveolar part, due to the dissociation of the hemoglobin, and that CO2 can easily comes out from the air sacs, and then it mainly moves out through the tertiary bronchi to the secondary bronchi, and then finally through the trachea, and then to the, by the nostril aperture, or by the nasal aperture, we can easily breathe out CO2, so which is mainly showing here. So what we are doing, we are inhaling oxygen. That oxygen, it moving inside the lungs. That lungs, they are having one particular part that is called air sac, and that is the last part of the lungs which mainly receive the air sac, and this part is having the association with the blood capillaries. So the blood capillaries associated with the lungs, they are just taking that oxygen coming from the air sac, and the RBCs, mainly by the hemoglobin of the RBC, it combined with the oxygen and form HbO2, or oxyhemoglobin, and then it finally moving to the target parts, mainly to the various body organs, to the all the body parts, and then the terminal parts of the body tissues, that oxygen finally detached from the oxyhemoglobin and move inside the cell, and then that cell, they are using that oxygen to breaking down process of the glucose molecule, and finally they emit carbon dioxide, 6 molecule of carbon dioxide, 6 molecule of water, and the main product for which we are just performing this respiration, the energy. So this is the final outcome of the respiration process, and these are the that four major steps Okay, and these four major steps or these four major parts are helping in the respiration process. So this is about the respiration process and their major parts. So hope you like this video, and thank you very much for watching this video.